There we are. Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to the second workshop of this series of 3 online workshops where we are targeting beneficial ownership data users to help understand the importance of structured data for comparison and analysis, and explore how the beneficial ownership data standard works, together with some data analysis tools that help to use to create BODS or to use it and build stories around that. So we had our first workshop a couple of weeks ago where we introduced the beneficial ownership data standard data generator and the basics of structured data. And today we will be introducing the open ownership register, which I hope that many of you are aware of, but we will introduce how it works, which data it got, and how to look data in there. And then we will also introduce other data analysis tools to help to analyze the register's bulk data, including how to pull BO data into a simple spreadsheet and how to analyze a big set of data from the register or from any other BODS data source. So as an overview from the agendas you might have received in the email, we will be giving a very brief overview of the tasks of the last workshop. Then we will introduce the registered with a small task and respond any questions you might have. And then we will, the second hour of the workshop, we will introduce Datasette and BODS data analysis notebook, which are 2 data analysis tools that can help you understand a bit better the register and work with bulk data. Again, respond any questions you may have, do a small task again, and a homework for those that are interested in working a bit more on that. So if we go directly into the tasks feedback, many thanks for those that submitted your homework and that asked questions. I know that to some of you the JSON URL wasn't working. We're still figuring out from a technical side how to improve it. It works sometimes, it doesn't work sometimes. So at some point I know that you tried a couple of times and it worked. So I encourage you to those that had the error message once to keep on trying, because it works eventually. We chose 2 tasks to provide feedback today, but then in the upcoming weeks we'll try to respond individually. Many of them were very good. I think that the first task, which was very straightforward on a simple ownership structure, was worked good for all of you, and the complexities came with indirect ownership and more complex ownership. So the 2 that we selected today are just to provide a very brief overview of it. If we go to this one, as you can see in the left diagram, we see 2 people that exercise ownership or control over one company, but then we see a person that has no links to nothing, and then we see below an entity that links to nowhere, so the arrow doesn't know where to point out to. And so when we go to the spreadsheet, we can see in the table in green above that we have a Sprinklewright Consult Ltd introduced as an unknown person, which is already something that shouldn't be done because you need to have a person in the person tab. But then if we go to the red table below, which is the ownership or control tab in the spreadsheet, we see on the first side that we have Sprinklewright Consult Ltd as a company that is linking to itself. So the first 2 columns say the same company, and so that is the last item where the company has the arrow pointing nowhere, is because the company is linking it to itself. So the arrow doesn't know where to go. So you always need to have different companies or different persons connecting to each other. And at the same time, the person that I said before, that it's in the green table, we don't have any interested person that links, sorry, in the interested person in the red table, we don't have that person linked to a company. So we have Muhammad and we have Faisal, which are the other two people that are introduced in the green table, but we don't have the other person, which is this company that was created under a person. So that's why the person that has a question mark in the middle, the third icon in the diagram, doesn't have a link to anywhere because it's created as a person, but it has no links. So just as a reminder that you always have to have, you have the person statements, you have the entity statements, which are introduced in the 1 and 2 tabs in the spreadsheet, but then you always need to connect them in the tab number 3, which is the ownership or control one. If you don't have them connected with each other, then they look like in this odd diagram. And then when we share the slide deck and everything, you might be able to access the spreadsheet that it's linked to this example in case you want to explore it. And if we go to the next one, this one was very good. The only thing that we saw is that the percentages and the ownership and control wasn't showing in the initial diagram, which is the one at the left. And that is basically because of where the numbers were introduced. So the diagram in the left relates to the table below it. So if you look at it as a column, the diagram in the left is responding to the table that it's linked below. And if you see, it says interest details 70, 20, 10. But those numbers, and if we go to the table at the right, at the top right side, those numbers should be in the share value. So when we change that and we work on the diagram again, we can see that now the numbers appear, and we have the ownership, the direct ownership of 70% from Fatima above. Then we have the 20% controlled by Mary in the middle, and then we have the indirect ownership between Joe on the 10% below. So again, you have the example there to link and work later. Are there any questions or things that you didn't get from these two very simple examples that you would like to ask before we start with the second workshop? Or Stevie, if you want to add something. Okay.
Sorry, I was just checking something. Everyone, yeah, it was really great to have people using this tool and sending us in their details. As Aga said, we're going to take some of the things on board and see if we can provide some more examples actually in the spreadsheet itself to link to good things that people can copy. And yeah, apologies if people had some issues with it, but yeah, it was great, and thank you to everyone who sent in their homework.
Okay, then we can directly start with today's topic, which is about public central registers and introducing the open ownership register and different data analysis tools. So if we go to the next slide, I would like to ask you all a very open question. Why do we need public, global, linkable beneficial ownership data? And this is an open question to the floor, so please raise your hands or respond over the chat. I want to know what your interests are. Why do you think we need not only public data, but that is globally linkable on beneficial ownership? And this is kind of a test because we discussed this last time in the last workshop, and many of the answers for these are in the structured data briefing that we shared as well. So any volunteers?
It's cheating if I answer, right? We're waiting.
I think it is.
We'll wait.
You might answer in the third. You can unmute yourself directly, Ogenahar, or let me unmute you if you want.
If people put their hands up, then I can unmute them.
There you are. You're able to speak now.
Good day, everyone, from whichever place you are. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Ogenegari. I discovered it was quite difficult for you to pronounce. I'm from Nigeria. So let me share my opinion. The importance of global linkable beneficial ownership. I think the perspective of making the data global so that different organizations or different authorities or bodies can work with it, because reading through the brief, I got to understand the concept of having a structured data that would be very difficult to work with if it's not structured in a particular pattern, right? So making it structured and putting it in a global perspective makes it easy to work with by different organizations or different parties as a case may be. So I think that's the reason why we would need a public global linkable beneficial ownership data.
Okay, thank you. So it will allow you to work with other people. We have Tamika on the chat that says it will help to reduce or tackle issues like illicit financial flows and criminals who use companies to hide money in other jurisdictions, share information among countries and entities, and know and contrast data on the real beneficiaries. Ideally, info that is updated and accurate, of course, because BO investigations go across borders. Okay, I agree with all of you. Most companies operate transnationally, so it is more cost-effective and saves time if there is interoperability. I couldn't agree more with all of you. Now we have the challenge on how to make it, right? Because I think that the why is very clear and the objective of what we could achieve it's clear. So how do we do it? And I will hand over to Steve, not to respond to that because it's a completely complex question that doesn't, it can't get solved just by us, but in the attempt to have that global linkable beneficial ownership data and how countries are doing, Steve, which as a reminder, he's the head of data and technology at Open Ownership, has been working a lot with countries. And so he will introduce the register and how we work on this. So Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Agus. Yes, for people who weren't in the first workshop, my name's Stephen. I'm the head of technology at Open Ownership. I'm based in Harare in Zimbabwe and going to be talking to you today about the Open Ownership Register and other tools that we have that try and demonstrate the value of having linked data across different jurisdictions or from different registers, so that you can help follow the information and connect up data from different countries and places, as people just talked about before. So let me just very quickly, I'll drop in the chat a link to the Open Ownership Register, which is something I'm going to talk about briefly. It's worth saying that the slide you're looking at right now, the image on the right-hand side, will come back to you later, but that's actual data. It's information that's taken from our Open Ownership Register and combined with other sources of information on people and people who've been sanctioned. And it's something we'll come back to a bit later. So we'll explain why there's a colorful kind of rainbow splodge on the right-hand side here. Now, just as a reminder of what we talked about last time and what we're going to be focusing on today, Open Ownership is my organization, and we work on beneficial ownership transparency. So helping to make the case for why people should publish better quality beneficial ownership data in order to achieve some of the policy aims that people have just highlighted. So that's, linking up company structures all across the world, being able to fight anti-corruption, and kind of a whole series of other benefits that we've identified through our research and work. And it's my job to try and help people to produce that better quality data so that they're able to more easily use it and to more easily kind of connect it and to achieve the kind of policy aims that they have at the end. Now, the diagram here, which people should hopefully recognize from the structured data briefing that we talked about last time, demonstrates why, if people collect better quality beneficial ownership data, it enables them to do more of the things that governments and registries need to be able to do. So to only collect the data that you need to achieve the aims you've got, to have kind of layered access to that. So allow people who are in law enforcement or in the government to see all the data, but to only publish the kind of information that you need to publish or that you want to publish, so that other people can help to use that data and to build on it. And as you go to the right of this diagram, you can see we have a list of potential users of that data. So people from the government themselves to other governments, private sector, civil society, and a list of benefits that we've identified through our research. So whether that be investigating financial crimes, trying to verify data, being able to reduce the cost for businesses to be able to carry out due diligence and other things. So this is all, the background for what we're talking about today is open ownership tries to help people to produce better quality data. And I'm going to show a few of the tools that we have on offer to try and demonstrate why that is valuable and why some of those approaches can be really useful in terms of tooling. So the Open Ownership Register. Now I've shared a link to the register in the chat, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that now, just what it does and how we put it together and how we work on it. But just, yeah, a little bit of background. So when open ownership first started off, this was in 2017, we realized that people needed more support if they wanted to be able to publish beneficial ownership data in a good way. And what best support could we give? The first thing we started to do was to develop the beneficial ownership data standard. Now that's a free and open guide that again we talked about next time, I'll mention again in a second, but that is published at standard.openownership.org and allows anyone to take that information and to use it as a guide for publishing high quality beneficial ownership data. Now my team has been developing that over 5 years. It's available in English, Spanish, and Russian if you go to the documentation site. And the idea there is that the more countries produce data that's standardized in the same ways, the easier it is for them to combine that data, the easier it is for them to follow chains that go into different jurisdictions or travel through different jurisdictions. And yeah, the more value can be realized from that data. So we created that, and then to show why having more data like that in line with BODS, so the Beneficial Ownership Data Standard, or BODS, I'll probably refer to it as, we also built the Open Ownership Register. Now, the register takes data from the UK, from Denmark, from Slovakia, and from Ukraine, and it puts it all together. So basically to do that, what we do is we take the data that's produced by those countries, we map it to the Beneficial Ownership Data Standard, and then we're able to put all of that data together into one big data set that can then be made searchable, can be visualized, people can go and look at that data. And so on register.openownership.org, that's how you can most easily discover and access that information. And I'm going to show you a few ways as well that we have tried to develop other tools so that people can, for example, download all of the data if you wanted to, or you could take it away and actually filter it and look at that data through tools that we've linked up to that. So what I'm going to do is take you on a guide and just go around the register website and to explain how to use it and why we think it's a very valuable tool and how we'll be adding more data to it in the future. So the latest figures that we have for the register is that we have about 22 million beneficial ownership records from 8.5 million companies and featuring about 9 million beneficial owners. Now, again, like I said, that's the UK, Denmark, Slovakia. And we put that all together and we then publish the data so it's openly available. This is made possible by the fact that those countries publish their data in a way that allows people to reuse it. So we hope that this not only shows what people can do with tools in terms of making the data searchable, usable, visualizing it and everything, but also that it demonstrates the value of the countries producing public data in the first place. Now, this is an ongoing battle. Lots of countries still don't release their data. They don't publish it openly, or they have licenses that mean we can't easily reuse it. But it is shifting. More and more countries are realizing that the more people can use the data, the better they'll be able to achieve some of the aims that they have by collecting the data in the first place. So hopefully you can go while I'm talking to the register, and you can have a little play around, and obviously it's free to use, so you can go there and you don't have to log in or anything to use it in future. We have actually got beneficial owners from 194 countries listed on that register by benefit of because they are from those countries, but they have to declare in the UK. So for example, we have people from Nigeria, like I know there's someone present from Nigeria. I'm based in Zimbabwe. I know there's tens of thousands of people from Zimbabwe who are registered as beneficial owners in the UK and other places. And we'll come back to some of that a little bit later on, so I can show you. But the top level functionality that you can get in the register is when you go there, you'll see there's a big search box. And so we're going to start off with talking about how you can search for people or search for companies or entities, and what information you can find about them when you get to that page. I'm going to use an example of the former Prince of Wales, but now King Charles. This data is taken from a little while ago. Now, Agus is kindly sharing in the chat some of the links, so you can go to this page itself on the register. Now, for a person, when you come to a page like this, so you can search for their name at the top. You'll always see that there's the search company or name of person box on every page, so you can always keep searching and go to find another person or another company. You'll see their name at the top, and in the kind of darker grey box, you'll see the details of companies where they have a declared beneficial ownership relationship. On the right hand side, you can see a few more details about them, about their birth date, for example, and their address and the provenance of the data, so which register this data came from in the first place. And then we also link off to places like Open Corporates to help people to find more about that person if they wanted to go and look them up, or they want to go and look up a company on Open Corporates, which is a fantastic resource that has hundreds of millions of companies listed on there, so you can find out more information. Now, so on the page, also just wanted to show a few other things you can do. So you should see red circles appear as I start to talk about things. So you can click View as Graph, and that gives you a visualized version of this person's beneficial ownership network. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. You can also download the BODS JSON, which is so that's the BODS data for this person. So the data that we have on this person, you can download it, and then you can take it away and use it if you wanted to. So it means you can download multiple sets of BODS data if you like, and go and use them. If you want to find out any more details that maybe can't all be captured on this page, and you want to go just to a page that explains the beneficial ownership relationship that, for example, here, Charles, Philip, Arthur, George, Prince of Wales has with the Prince of Wales's charitable foundation, you can click the grey details button that's circled now, and then that takes you to another page, which I'll show in a second, giving you any more details that we've got that we have found from pulling that in from the register originally. And you can also see that we have, to explain more about how we get this data and where it comes from, we also have a provenance section on the right hand side that will always show you the source record. So where we got it from, what date open ownership went and got, in this case, this information from the UK PSC register, or the persons with significant control register that the UK first released in 2016, and which we pull in the data from on a kind of monthly basis. I'm going to be doing that more regularly soon. So that's what you can do on these pages. Just to say, I'll go through all this. If you've got any questions, and if you want to have a play with it, we're having a Q&A session a little bit later, so be happy to answer any questions that people have about how to use the register and what you can find. So as I discussed earlier, so this is the page you'd get through to if you click on details. So you get to a page, this is a simple example in this case, but it says there's a specific URL just for the beneficial ownership chain between this named person and this named charitable foundation. So as a reminder for what we talked about last time, this is made possible via our use of the the beneficial ownership data standard, because what we have in that standard, as Agus talked about, is we have person statements about people. We have entity statements about entities like companies, but it can also be other things like state-owned enterprises or trusts. And then we have what we call ownership or control statements, and that can connect the people to the entities by explaining how they exert ownership or control over them. So in this case, you can see that it was declared that from, so the dates in reverse, so from the 6th of April 2016, the Prince of Wales had the right to appoint and remove directors of the Prince of Wales's charitable foundation. So hopefully with the arrows, and you can see all of the information there about, you can see where we got the data from, and you can see how what we have is Prince Charles, who's a person, so he has a person statement. You've got the ownership or control, so an explanation of how that person is a beneficial owner, like what relationship they have with the entity at the bottom. And then with the entity, you've got things like their name, you've got their address, you've got the foundation date, and you've got all this information. And having all of that for more and more registers and for more and more countries means you can do things like this. So we're able to connect people from different countries to entities, whether they be from the same country or from other countries. And I'm going to show some more complicated examples than this in a little while when we do a kind of demonstration. This is an example of the diagram that you get. So it's worth saying that for people, we try our best in the register to represent not just the information about the person, but all of the companies or the entities that they're connected to. And you can, in turn, you can see how those entities are connected to each other. So obviously what we're trying to do with beneficial ownership is we're always trying to get back to the natural person or the real person who's up at the top of that chain. So for example, here, if you looked at Countryside Fund Trading Limited by itself, you might not be able to find all of the details about the connection back to our new king in the UK, back to the Prince of Wales. But because of the way we structure the data, it's possible to visualize that and to show the connections between them. Now, again, I'll show a more complicated version of this a bit later on, but just to let you know that on any page, so on any page for a person or page for a company or an entity, you can always click on that button to visualize the network. Excuse me, sorry, a bit of water. The next button I talked about was the downloading the data. So in all the cases on the register, the data is available in what we call BODS JSON. So that's the beneficial ownership data standard, and we recommend that data produced in line with that is collected as JSON, and so that's JavaScript object notation, which has a kind of nested structure. So you can see in here that we have like a bunch of identifiers that you can see there. So we have an identifier from the UK register and also from Companies House, and so we have a bunch of different things you can see in that data, but you can download it and take it away if you wanted to use it for other purposes or to share it with anyone. And all of these pages, it's fully open. You can just use the register as much as you like. You can link to it, you can download it, you can share links to these, either to the data or to the graph or to the information just about the chain between one company and one person, for example. So all of this is all available on the website. I gave you a kind of reminder as we talked through that, because I thought it would be useful, but this is just again a reminder of BODS, so beneficial ownership data standard that we introduced last time. So the register is a demonstration of why BODS is useful. So the more countries produce their data in line with BODS, the easier it is for us to take that data and to combine it. Now, at the moment, we are taking the UK's data, we're taking Denmark's data, we're taking Slovakia's data, and we're taking kind of old Ukraine data because they've stopped publishing it, but and we're putting it together by mapping it to BODS. I'm excited to say that actually countries have started producing their own BODS data. So Nigeria's new beneficial ownership register that should be unveiled soon is available in line with BODS. Latvia is another country that's adopted the beneficial ownership data standard and has published all of their data in line with that. We're waiting for them to finalize the process so they do it more regularly, but they've done it once before. So we're going to support them on that. And also Armenia is another country that we've been working with, which has used BODS so far for all of the beneficial ownership declarations from their extractive companies. So they're a member of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, who we partner with. So all of their extractive companies already have quite complicated structures published using BODS because their register was built to publish BODS data. And in 2023, they're going to be rolling that out to their whole economy. So all of the companies in Armenia are going to be using tools that collect the data as BODS. So we're pretty excited about that. It's going to be a real leap up. They reckon there's going to be about 100,000 companies that declare between January and March. So it'll be really interesting to be looking at that data and helping them to use it, using some of the tools that we are going to talk about today. So what I wanted to do is to explain a little bit about the register, and we're going to go and we're going to do some we're going to talk about how it's used, and we're going to give you a task. So you go off and you try and find a company and find out about that company on the register. But just to say, for the kind of plans we have for the register, in a couple of weeks' time, we'll be publishing data from the UK, Denmark, and Slovakia, but it'll be much more detailed because we're using a different version of our data standard. That's going to be released in a couple of weeks' time. Some tools that I'm showing you later on are going to be updated to allow anyone to reuse that data, and also to connect it up with some tools that we've created, what we call notebooks, that are used for data analysis. So we'll be able to have a live view on the UK, Denmark, and Slovakia's data to understand nationally what is happening with that data, which nationalities people are declaring, what you can see from the kind of the patterns of usage across all of that data. Then we're also going to be getting new sources into the register. So the UK has just released what's called the Register of Overseas Entities. We will be getting that data into our register. That's where anyone who's owned property in the UK, that's any foreign companies that own property in the UK that's been bought since 1999 have to declare the beneficial ownership of that overseas company or overseas entity. Now it's getting a bit complicated how that happens and what they declare, but the data is available, so we're going to be making use of that. And I really hope that we'll have the whole of Nigeria's data available in all the tools we're talking about today pretty soon. So hopefully that will be of interest to people joining us from or who work on Nigeria. Now I want to take you to a couple of examples. So I'll be going out of my presentation and going to some of these examples just to show you live why they are useful. So hopefully you can all see, everyone should be able to see AquaTreat. I guess, can you just confirm that you can see?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. So this is a live example. So now I'm just on my browser on the register. So you can see what I talked about earlier on is possible. You can click on the button, the viewer's graph button, to see the graph. You can also click on any of these people. So if you want to go in and look closer at any people in particular, you can just click on them, and then you can go straight through to either their page or their graph. And the reason we talk about AquaTreat is because it connects back to a person called Michael Ashcroft, who is a UK political donor who has a very complicated, you'll see him up the top here, network of companies that are all interconnected. And you can see all of them listed here in terms of how they all are connected to each other. So it's just worth saying that that's what you can do with the register. If you have a lot of data from different places, you can connect it back up to that one person. So this is an example of some individual with quite complicated structures to declare. Now, in terms of Xerox, hopefully you can see Xerox now. What we want to show here is that we have people from multiple jurisdictions, and actually the beneficial ownership information you can see here is only as detailed as it is, because if you can look in the provenance section on the right, it combines data from the UK register and the Slovakian register. So some things are declared in the UK, some things are declared in Slovakia, and actually those two countries have slightly different rules. So it means there's more information you can get, but it can still be combined by having the data in a common format, a common standardized format. And what you can see here, if we go to the viewers graph, again, quite complicated, but you can see people who are declared from multiple countries. So you can see the little flags by their names for people from different countries. And you can also see on this, if companies have been dissolved or they're no longer active, then they come up as light gray. So you can see this Xerox Property Services Limited one is probably no longer active, but it becomes a bit addictive with some of these. You can look up kind of the biggest companies in the world. You can look up your Googles and Xerox and whatever, and you can find all the information about how they are owned or controlled, going back through other places. And then another example of what this shows is we get to a limit of how much we know. So in this case here, we have a company from the Netherlands. I'm pretty sure that's recognizing the flag, BV, from the Netherlands, yes, that has been declared because it has an ownership relationship with Xerox UK Holding Limited, but we don't know the beneficial owner of Xerox Investments Europe BV because the Netherlands register is not public and it's not available in a way that we can link up all of the data to make it available like this.
Steve, sorry, before we go to the next example, we have a hand raised by Andres.
Okay, yeah.
And Andres, you should be able to unmute and speak.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Thanks, Stephen. So what happens when there is a contradiction? Say that, I mean, you were showing a case, say, from Slovakia, where like you combine things. And so say that company A from the UK is owned by company B from Slovakia. And so in the UK, the Slovakian company said that John was the BO, but in Slovakia, maybe Mary appears as the BO, so that you have that contradiction. Is that shown in any way?
So it is worth saying that this is an area that we're actively working on in BODS. So it's important to say that the data standard we don't imagine that things are true, but we imagine that they're statements made at a particular time. So the statements I was talking about earlier on are person statements, entity statements, and ownership or control statements made at a certain time. So in some cases, so far the register has some ways we use a thing called replaces statement. So within all of the statements, we have a field called replaces statement, which allows you to connect up the data in terms of saying this statement replaces this other statement. But right now, to be honest, in the register, we use version 0.1 of the data standard, and we don't actually use replaces statement. We will be using replaces statement in about a month's time, once we start to do the work to incorporate the version 0.2 data into it. But to be really detailed, there are ways for publishers in using the data standard to say this information supersedes this other information, but we have an open issue about how to show when there is conflicting information. So whether that be for multiple registers, or for example, in a country where there's provincial registers versus a national register, what do you do if those two things don't line up? Another example we've looked at recently is there's an organization called GLIFE, or the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation. They publish information on public listed companies mainly, and there's about 140,000 companies that they have information on, that we have information on. So what we think we're going to end up doing is showing a kind of layers of information, saying this is what the UK said, this is what Denmark said, and to connect it all back to the people, but not to make a judgment of which is true or not. We can say this statement was made on this date in the UK, this statement was made in Denmark on another date, this statement was declared here, and we can link them all back, but we don't necessarily say that one is true or should supersede the other. But it's an area we're actively working on in BODS. So yeah, a very detailed, good question. Right now, the register kind of assumes that the national, it's focused on national data publishers. So it doesn't have that kind of complicated level built into it. Hope that answers the question. It's worth saying just right now that the data standard that we develop, there's a place on our website and on GitHub where you can find all of the issues that we're working on, so that all the features that we want the data standards to have in future, and we really welcome kind of feedback and guidance on some of that. I can share the link later if that would be of interest. The last example I was just going to talk about here is Maersk, which is the big shipping company in it's Danish, and you can see this is somewhere where they have declared some companies. They've got some companies in the UK, but also they have companies declared in Denmark, so we're able to connect from the UK back to Denmark, and in this case actually 2 unknown persons that are undeclared in the Danish system. So some of those are kind of good examples of where there's complicated data from the register. And let me just get back into the slideshow. And so to give you a few examples, sorry, Andrew just said something. It'd be great to alert authorities there are contradictions between countries. That would be very useful. Yeah. So I'm happy to share some of the thoughts that we have about that. We are actively working on what we call change over time at the moment, which would be and various things that kind of connect back to that. So saying who said what at what time about beneficial ownership of relating to a person or of a company, and how do you try and layer that to build up a picture that's as close to as a kind of accurate and up-to-date view of what the data shows. It may not be accurate in terms of being truthful, but it is what the company or the person have declared. I see that there's another hand that's gone up. Agus, are you able to allow someone to? Oh, I can ask to unmute.
Yeah, I have just done. Oliver, you should be able to speak.
Okay, thank you so much, Stephen, for the presentation. And in line with what Andres has proposed about notifying authorities, I have a question in line with the beneficial ownership transparency. A few years back, 2020, there was a list that came from one of the offshore accounts or countries where individuals actually invest their monies there or saves their monies there, and no one knows how much or what exactly they do in those countries. In line with contradictions between countries, how do we use the available data or information on the owners of the company or the beneficial ownership in trying to find out on investments in offshore accounts?
Okay, I think I understand the question. So it's worth saying that a huge amount of jurisdictions that require people to declare beneficial ownership have their own sanctions and enforcement regime. So if someone in a country has to declare what they own or how they're a beneficial owner, then it's kind of responsibility of the law officials and enforcement body or the registrar in that country. In some cases, they don't quite have the powers yet. Maybe people are moving towards it, but obviously it's not fully our responsibility to say whether the data is true or not. There are law enforcement officials and other people in those countries that are responsible for doing that. But in terms of connecting the data and having it come from secrecy jurisdictions, if that's what I understood your question to be, a huge amount of international pressure and international standards are moving more towards encouraging countries to publish more information that they have about beneficial ownership. not everyone's going to make theirs public, but the push is definitely towards that. And a lot of the crown dependencies and overseas territories, for example, your Cayman Islands and Jersey and other places are all due to actually create public beneficial ownership registers by the end of 2023. So a lot of the data and information you've seen being leaked over the last 10 years will hopefully be published in a more official way in the coming years. And what we're trying to do is develop our data standards so that if all those countries start publishing the information, then eventually it can all be turned into the same kind of standardized formats so that it can be combined. And then the challenge you have is working out which ones came first, how you can connect it across different jurisdictions, whether the information has been checked, and how you visualize all of that and show all of it through the data itself. So I hope that answers the question. But so, I mean, the jurisdictions are responsible for finding out whether people are doing the accurate disclosures, and we are trying to work with a large number of places to help them publish more data that could be used and could be combined from different jurisdictions. It's worth saying that if you were talking about something that's was published by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, so the ICIJ, as part of their Panama Papers or Pandora Papers or anything, I'll talk a little bit later about how our data is actually being combined with theirs to build up a global picture of what you can learn from that data. Yeah, hopefully that helps. So I will just quickly, I'm going to go into a couple of cases. I guess, how long have I got left till we need to get to the...
We are already over time, so
okay. Sorry, but we've done some questions and answers. So,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go very quickly. So there's a few examples over the last couple of years where people have used the Open Ownership Register in terms of finding some information that helps their investigations into things that happen elsewhere. So one example we talk about is that there's lots of British companies that are declared that might have links to other jurisdictions. And so in this case, Graham Barrow and Ray Blake, who are kind of experts in investigating data, were able to link UK shell companies back to other companies that were linked to the ownership of the chemicals that exploded in Beirut. Now, this diagram here is how complicated those relationships were. This is taken from one of the briefings that we have on the Open Ownership website. But you can see that some of this information about Savaro Limited is published on the Open Ownership Register. What I would see this diagram as is as an example of how complicated beneficial ownership can get. Not all of this data is declared, but if it was all published by all the countries you can see represented here, so there's lots of different country flags and lots of people from different jurisdictions. If it was all published in a standardized way, you could connect it in more automated ways to get this kind of picture. But some of the so that's just an example of how you can find some information on the Open Ownership Register that can help to shine a light on some parts of this kind of structure. And also recently the Transparency International teams in Russia and the UK worked together on an investigation they called the Bottle Laundromat. And this was a kind of uncovering of information showing how much money was moved out of Russia by overpricing some bottle molding machines. And they were able to, not just the Open Ownership Register, we just played a very small part, but they were able to identify more companies who are declared as owners of UK shell companies by being able to search in the Open Ownership Register. So if you go to this investigation, you can see there's a place where they kind of identify, I'm trying to remember if maybe it was the Isle of Man, but there was an organization based outside of the UK that had been declared as having a beneficial ownership relationship with about 15 companies in the UK, and they were able to find that information by being able to search it on the Open Ownership Register. So again, good examples of where there's a lot of information that's hidden at the moment, but the more we can try to make it public, the better it is to use that. I don't know if there's any more questions that I could we could take now. If not, we can move on. Oliver's question in chat is, don't you think offshore investments are contributing to the lack of transparency and openness when it comes to beneficial ownership? Absolutely. Fully 100% agree. But what I was trying to say is that a lot more of those jurisdictions are being told to be more transparent when it comes to beneficial ownership. There's still a huge amount of issues and a long way to go. But the international standards for this are being raised, and people are being encouraged to release more information. So there's a lot of countries that have promised to publish registers in the next year, so by the end of 2023. So I hope if we were to come back in a year's time, we'd have a lot more data that we could connect up to try and help with this work. I guess are there any more questions that you've seen for people?
No, I don't see any hand raised, but please jump
Should we move? We'll move on. If there aren't any more questions, we can move on to the task. So we've got a task for people to undertake. Okay, great. So hopefully if you've gone to register.openownership.org already, or you've got it on a browser in front of you, we have a whole series of questions that we want you to try and answer about WASEM, which is a Togo-based cement company that we know is there in the Open Ownership Register. I guess, do you want to say anything at this point about how long people have, with an eye on the time?
I think we can give around 7 minutes until 5 past, something like that. And then we will ask you to share with us, either share your screen or just orally what you found and how it was, very quickly to answer these questions, so that at 10 past we can begin with the second part of the workshop, if that works. I have just pasted the register link in the chat, and hopefully you'll be able to search for that, but we'll stay, of course, connected here to see if you have any questions or problems in the process of searching for these and accessing to the information.
Great. So you got till 5 past to try and get some of the answers to this, and then come back and be ready to have a conversation about it. Yeah. Then let us know in the chat if there's any questions in the meantime.
Hope you're doing okay with your task. We have 2 more minutes. In the meantime, I think there's a question on the chat by Irene. She's asking about the future for BODS and keep the dataset downloadable as a whole.
Yeah, I was just going to reply. So yeah, Irene, yeah, a very good question. The data set's getting larger and larger. It's worth saying that we are in the process of launching all of the work that we've done on the Open Ownership Register to allow the register to be up to 10 times larger. So that would be about 200 gig. And we hope, we dream that we'll be able to get that much data in there. But I'll be talking about some tools in a little bit. So we realize that it's a huge data set to work with. And we want to make that easier. So we have what we call our data analysis tools that allow you to download that in smaller chunks or in different formats. They're a lot smaller. And also I'll be showcasing something called Datasette that we link up to that to allow you to be able to search and filter and do everything with that data. It's worth saying we, as of probably about 2 or 3 weeks time, will give you the ability not only to download the whole of the register, but also if you just want to take the UK's data in line with the beneficial ownership data standard, or just Denmark's data, or just Nigeria's data in future, or just Slovakia's data, we'll be offering that functionality for free so that you can get those specific data sets. Yeah. But thank you for the question.
Okay, there was another question on the chat that I responded, but Steve, feel free to add any details.
Catherine's. Oh, so yeah, Catherine's question is there. The information of the beneficial owner's address, interest, etc. depends on the information you get from each BO country registry, and how do you cope with habeas data issues? That's a good question. So yes, it does depend. So for example, the countries that we use, the UK declares, for example, declares the name of the person, but doesn't give you their birth date. So it gives you their birth month and birth year, and they only declare beneficial ownership interests that are in ranges. So it says this person has has more than 25% of an interest in this company, rather than giving the exact detail. But Denmark published the exact detail down to several decimal points of the exact interest that people have in companies. Yes, it varies from place to place. The data standard that we look after allows you so a lot of fields are marked as being kind of mandatory. So obviously, if you've got to have a person statement, you need a person's name. But you don't have to have all of the fields filled in. So it's quite flexible in terms of being able to allow for more data or less data to be published. And yeah, so again, if you go to standard.openownership.org, you can see exactly what information we recommend publishing, and everything there is listed as saying whether you should have it or should not have it. Our guidance is that we would recommend publishing information on interests, for example. So some countries do not publish, they'll say this person has a beneficial ownership relationship with this company, but not tell you what the interest is, how they are a beneficial owner, and what the reasoning is. So we would recommend that that's not enough information really to be going on. So it's kind of ongoing conversation with a lot of countries as to how much they release. But Agus's comment is exactly right. Like all of the data that's made public is in line with the local jurisdictions, rules and regulations. In some countries like the UK, the data is published under statute, so it has that it's legally covered when it's published. But that's an ongoing issue that's different in different countries.
Okay, does anyone want to jump in and respond to the first question? We have around 3 minutes to get this responded, so we need to go fast. Please raise your hands if you want. It's a very straightforward, easy question. Who are the beneficial owners of this company, and what type of interest and control they exercise? one at a time, please. We won't give you the answers to these questions.
If you want to answer, you can put your hand up and I can unmute you.
If there are no volunteers, then I'd suggest we move forward and you take this as part of the homework, if you want. And because all of these responses are in the register data just by connecting different pages with each other. So, okay, now I'm seeing two hands. Catherine, you were first. Do you want to jump in?
I just have a question. Why there is some unknown people? You don't have the information. How you know that there is someone that you don't know who is?
So yes, as Steve was saying a couple of minutes ago, the information we collect depends on what it's published by the original source. And so let's say, for instance, in the Raffles holdings that we have an unknown person behind, or in Togolese state, and well, I'll talk about the state later. It depends. We don't have information about these. Is it Panama? What? Yeah, so we don't have information about the person behind that holdings. So it's not known because it's not published. And as we said, we just republish what it's there. And if we had access to that country's register beyond this Togo, and this comes from an EATA experience a couple of years ago, we could be able to connect different jurisdictions. But as that country doesn't publish them, we don't know. So we know that there is a person behind because a beneficial owner needs to be a physical person, but we don't know who that person is. And on the state side, the Togolese state, we have some recommendations on how beneficial owners of public of state-owned enterprises should be published. And in the case of the state, we suggest that there are a series of data around kind of who is the person that exercises the control, who is the director, whether there is a government agency that that holds control over that company. So saying the Togolese state in this case is quite broad. We suggest publishing specific people that exercise control in that. And so that's why we're also saying that we don't know the persons behind that. Oliver, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yes, just as an attempt. It's quite interesting. I think I was connecting with what Stephen was presenting earlier on. The first question, who is the beneficial owners of this company? Of course, they've listed all the owners, the perceived owners, of course, which I may consider as the managers just. But in this case, who are the beneficial owners? I think the Togolese state are the beneficial owners of YChem or YSEM Togo. In the search, of course, there is even YSEM Brazil. I don't know what link they may have with YSEM Togo. Then what type of interest or control do they have? I think the data that has been presented do not have enough information because they are running YSEM through various, I observed that they are running it through different entities, I may call them, or trusts or consultancy companies. So what control, interest or control which they have, I cannot determine at the moment. I think we need to delve much into the information. Do they have other interest or control in other companies? Yes. At the bottom there is Togo Rail. Now, I know YSEM is a cement company. However, the Togo Rail, it's not clear what they're dealing in, but it has got direct link, but the information still remains unknown. When did the ownership or relationship start? For this one, I think I've not looked at it very much. Does the company have interest or control of any other company? So they are listed companies within the list that we've been given or the information that we've been given. such as YFM that I was seeing. Which other one? Let me just open it. Yeah, I'm seeing there's the YFM Equity Partners, but the most interesting one, it's the James Alfred Viger, which is owned by Thermal Energy Ventures Limited. Then it goes to Quaz Limited and so on. So you may not know the other companies, but my other interest is on the KNLM Consulting Limited, because this one, it's which is owned by David William Powell. It looks like it's the most direct one linked to YSEM or YChem. Then what is the primary source of information? This one I may not be able to comment. So I think in a nutshell, this is what I could capture within the shortest period of time that we are given. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Very brave to try to answer all of them. I won't respond to all of your attempts, because we could be discussing a lot. I just wanted to flag that, of course, David William Powell is the more direct one. But for instance, we do know that David has over 75% ownership and control of the KNLM Consulting Ltd, but we don't know the type of ownership or control this company exercises over WASM. So we do know that the beneficial owner through an indirect relationship is David William Powell, one of the beneficial owners, but we don't know the exact exercise ownership or control he exercised over WASM, because KNLM Consulting could have just 5% or 25% of WASM. Even if he is the full beneficial owner of that company, he could have a very small influence in WASM. So that's why all the verification and validation of the information and having full information on that. And another thing that I wanted to flag on what you mentioned about TEV Holdings Limited, where we have two people, we have, well, Anthony Charles Hammersley, which is the same person, but it's duplicated because of differences in the way that it's registered, and that's something that happens all the time. We have that the relationship, it's in light gray, which means that it has ended. And if we go there, we see that it has ended in 2019. So there we should look at the other chain way above with all these different YFM companies and above to the beneficial owners, which if you go back there, you can see as a person was sharing on the chat, we have David Alan Bell and two other people that exercise control over that company. So I encourage you to, so we can move forward to try to respond to these questions, to click on every item that you can see in the diagram or in the search function to identify where there are gaps in the information, where you can identify the link between the people and the companies all the way down, where we have a very complex ownership structure above and to see, because then you can also connect whether this relationship ended in this day and this new one started right after that one. And so this can lead you to investigation hints to keep on looking for. So if there are no further questions beyond some ideas that that Mukuk is sharing on the chat, I suggest we move forward within the second phase, which we are running way behind.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Anders, is it okay if you put your question in the chat? It's just, it's worth saying that if people are interested, so that WASM is an example of where there's a state that is exerting some kind of ownership or control over a company, and we're going to be publishing, we're partnered with the EITI team, and we're going to be publishing a whole publication about this probably in early December, talking all about the kind of issues that are raised, because this data is published because the EITI standard asks for information on state ownership and other things. So yeah, it's just worth mentioning that we've So got more information forthcoming if anyone's interested in that particular topic. So I'll try and go quicker through this second half. Irene's question was really good. So the register is currently about 25 gigabytes worth of data. If you download the whole lot, it's freely available from our download page, but it's kind of difficult to work with if you're not familiar with using this kind of data. So what I wanted to showcase and what we're going to talk about in the second half is tools that we've got to help people use that information to go off and to work with it in tools that you might be more familiar with or that developers might prefer to use. So we call these the beneficial ownership data analysis tools. Agus hopefully is able, yes, yeah. Thank you for sharing the link. So what happens here is that my team at Open Ownership works very closely with a team called Open Data Services, and they have a tool called Flatterer, which allows you to take JSON data, which is what we recommend BODS is published in, and turn it into other formats that people can make use of. So this is the page that you can see for the Open Ownership Register. If you go to the tools link by clicking on the home page and in the top left-hand corner, you can also see that there's Latvia data. So you can see all of this, but just for Latvia rather than for the whole register. These are tools that are updated every month at the moment. We're going to make that more regular. But basically what you're seeing now is a kind of a breakdown of what the latest data from the Open Ownership Register tells us. So you can see at the top, this data was exported on the 6th of October 2022. And if you go to that link and you scroll down, you can see a lot of numbers and a lot of example data from the register. But what we do is in where it says downloads and links to hosted databases, you can download, when you click on CSV download, you'd get a zip file full of the CSVs for all of the types of tables we've got below. So if you just wanted to look up all of the addresses for the whole register, then you can download that and you can go to the person_addresses CSV, and you would have a CSV file with all of that information in. We're doing work right now to update these tools, so you'll also be able to export it straight into Excel if there's if there's less than 200,000 entries in any one particular table. But to link this back to what we discussed last time in the first workshop, so the information that we recommend collecting as BODS data is split up into person statements, entity statements, and ownership or control statements. And what this tool is doing is further breaking those down into a bunch of the stuff that makes up person statements, a bunch of the stuff that makes up entity statements, and a bunch of the stuff that makes up ownership or control statements. So you can see all of those listed down the left-hand side. And then you are able to use these tools to combine the data and to join the data and to kind of query the data from those different places. So instead of just having a massive 25 gigabyte JSON file that you want to do some work with, you're able to use that in different formats. So there's CSV, there'll be XLS, SQLite, Postgres. We've done the work to kind of take the data and to convert it into those formats. And we're doing more work on this actually this week and next week, so that by the middle of November, you'll be able to look at this data for particular countries. So for the UK, for Denmark, and for Slovakia, not just for the whole of the Open Ownership Register, because when you look at the whole register, it's huge. But we hope this makes it easier for people to work with the data. Now, there was a link on the last link in that format section is to a tool called Datasette. That's Datasette with ETTE at the end. Now, this is a free platform that's been created by a guy called Simon Willison. The aim of Datasette is that anyone who has a CSV file or has JSON data can basically put that into Datasette, and you can immediately search, filter, visualize, and do whatever you want to with that data, as well as being able to then export it back out again. So on the right, you can see what our data looks like when it's put into Datasette. But for example, if you, we're going to go into looking at how to do this right now, but if you then you've got 8.5 million entities here in this view. If you only wanted to find entities or companies that were registered in a particular city or whose addresses mentioned a particular postcode or whatever, you can apply that search filter. And then once you've done that, you can download that data. You can see it here. It says this data as JSON or CSV. So this tool allows you to take a huge data set, filter it right down, and then export that data again so that you can continue working with it. And hopefully it makes it a lot quicker for people to reuse the data and to learn from it and to find out whatever you want to find out, because sometimes it can be challenging to use the kind of these large data sets. What the work that we've done to try and help people use this data and to make the case that the more and more data is published in this kind of way using BODS, the easier it is and the better it is to work with, is we've created a data analysis notebook. So that's a kind of notebook is a term used in data science community in case people haven't heard it before, but it's a piece of technical work that takes a huge series of questions. So in this case, I think we've got about 170 questions that you can ask of any BODS data set. And then it runs that against the data and answers questions in line with the open ownership principles that my team has put together over the last 5 years. So those are principles that show whether beneficial ownership reforms being pursued in a certain country are solid or not, and you can see them listed on the left-hand side here. So they relate to having comprehensive coverage, sufficient detail being published about the interest that someone has and other things, how the data is structured, whether it's up to date, and I'm just checking in the chat to make sure. Agus, if you've got the link to the blog post that announces this notebook, that would be really great to share. And just so you know, so we launched this work about 2 or 3 months ago. And if you go into the the blog post that Agus has just shared, you'll find a link to where you can see this notebook for Latvia. So Latvia has BODS data for about 125,000 companies. And you can use this and you can see a live version of the notebook, so you can learn all about what's going on in that country in terms of all of the queries that we've written for it. And it's worth saying all of this work is openly published on our GitHub account and on various other places, so you can find it all via the Open Ownership website. And we will be reusing this for the UK data, for Denmark's data, and for Slovakia's data that we're going to publish soon, as well as trying to do it for Nigeria's when we get that. So you'll be able to learn more about that data by using this kind of analysis sitting on top of that data. It can obviously be added to and updated so that you can answer a whole series of questions. Now, this is the kind of advanced version of what you can do when you have structured data in line with BODS. And so you can use SQL or structured query language in order to find answers to the questions you want. So the data analysts on my team have done that work to create the notebook. So that's a great example of where there's a lot of work done for you. So if countries start to publish BODS data, it takes a matter of a few hours to create a notebook that looks at that data and helps analyze it. This, for people who haven't worked with this kind of data or seen SQL before, on the left-hand side here is an example of some code written to look at BODS data. So in this case, I believe, check it's for the whole of the Open Ownership Register. Or maybe is it filtering for the UK? Sorry, I was trying to think. Anyway, so this is one of my colleagues looking to see the number of Russian-owned companies set up in the UK since 2010. So this is what the data that we've got shows. So you can see on the left, we've got a whole series of things about where there's people who are declaring nationalities as being the Russian Federation. You can see that that's then been plotted over time to demonstrate the kind of trends that you can see from what's happening there. So there's a timeline from 2010 to 2022 along the bottom. So this is just one example of a kind of question you can answer if you have this structured data. Again, going more into that, this is something that another colleague looked at. So on the left, you can see for all of the people who are Russian nationals, how complicated and how many other companies they link to. So there's a couple of kind of little clusters in the bottom left and on the right, where you can see that there's a large number of companies connected to one or two people. And on the right, you can see that the majority of ownership statements involving Russian nationals are declared in the UK, but there's also some in Latvia. For people who don't know, there's a lot of the work in Latvia has discovered links to Russian money that's moving through Latvia. So that's interesting to find that out. And you can also see the kinds of interests, so the kind of either the shareholding or the voting rights, ability to appoint the board, or other kind of influence or control that those people might hold over that person. So this is an example where we want to show that having this data allows you to ask these kind of questions. And then obviously, if you knew exactly what you were looking for, you wanted to delve in even further, then you could take some information like this and say, oh, I just want to filter it by this list of individuals to see what I can find out about them, or I just want to filter it by people who exhibit particular behaviors, let's say, in the beneficial ownership information. So who maybe are connected to 3 or more companies. There's companies like, so in Latvia, for example, when someone wants to go and set up a new business, they have a system where they check if that person is already listed as a director or as a beneficial owner of 5 or more companies. So the way that they try to kind of identify people who maybe they want to have a little bit more of a closer look at is that they have a kind of a barrier. They say, if you're already involved with 5 or more companies, then maybe we should have just a slightly closer look at you. Not that it's necessarily a red flag, but it just might be another indicator that people want to look at. So this is all things that you can do when you have this data and you have some kind of data analysis ability. And what we just wanted to say is that we are helping to create those kind of tools because we realize that people who work for some of these registers and people who work for some organizations don't have some of that experience themselves. So my colleagues who are the data analysts are fantastic at doing all this kind of work. On a larger scale, getting back to the diagram that I was showing you earlier, we have open data about beneficial ownership from a number of countries. There's also information published by ICIJ in a beneficial ownership database of the kind of leaked data that they've got over the last 10 years. There's a service called Open Sanctions, which publishes open data on sanctioned individuals, so tries to pull together information about who's sanctioned all over the world. And there's other sources of data that are out there. For example, the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation data that I talked about earlier. And what you're seeing a visualization of right now is a piece of work that will probably be released in about 2 or 3 weeks' time called Open Screening. And what has been done for Open Screening is we've taken all the data from our register and from other registers, turned it into a model called Follow the Money data model, and then connected any beneficial ownership data from official sources that we've got or from leaked sources back to people who are sanctioned. So what you're seeing is a visualization of companies and individuals who are connected via with a kind of a view of people who have been sanctioned. So in the middle, if you're able to zoom in, can't zoom in on this, but we're happy to share the link to where you can kind of go and see this visualization. You'd find the companies and the individuals that are connected to the most amount of other people. And so you can go and visualize that work. So this is something where we've been working with the Open Sanctions team and Team Link Curious, and really excited for people to be able to visualize and query and look into this data themselves. So Agus has just shared the link. You can go there right now and you can see the data from Open Sanctions and ICIJ, and there'll be more data sources added to it in hopefully a couple of weeks' time. So I just wanted to show you a couple of quick examples of what you can do using the Datasette tool that I mentioned earlier on. And I'll just take you to, let me just open up these as links. Yeah. And so I'll show you how this tool works. So hopefully everyone can see, I think this is register and then custom SQL query at the top. Agus, can you just confirm that that's all working?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, perfect. So what we have here is this is Datasette. This is a free tool that anyone can run that has taken all of the data we've got from the register and put it into Datasette. So then you can write your own queries at the top section here, and you can go and you can look into any of these particular fields. And what you can see for all of them is that all the information we had has been broken down, so you can combine or ask questions of anything you like, any field. So for example, here we can look at entity statement, and there's a founding date, incorporated in jurisdiction name, etc. And then further down, there's information about the kinds of interests that people have and things like that. So for example, if you wanted to write a query that said, for companies founded in 2010, show me all of the ones where, for example, show me all the ones founded in 2010 that are from the UK or that are from Denmark or that are from Slovakia. So you can do this kind of work, and you can write a query that then gives you answers by linking any of the fields here. So by having that good quality data, it means you can ask questions that are complicated, like the one we saw earlier. So only looking at people who've declared their nationality as being the Russian Federation, who are declared as beneficial owners, what kind of beneficial ownership interests they have. Now, some of the straightforward examples that I can show you here is we've got two examples of a query written at the top, and every time you use Datasette, if you filter it, you'll be able to see at the top how that query is written. So there's lots of tutorials and things that we can share that teach you how to write SQL. I'm not an expert in this, but it's people on my team are expert. So what you can see here is we've just done a piece of work that says, show me the name from person nationality. So there's a table called person nationalities. The name is the name of the country. So where are they a citizen of? And group it by the name and then order by the count. So you can see that in the open ownership register, the vast majority of people have the nationality of being from the United Kingdom. So, we've got, over 6 million people from there. Second is Romania. So 146,000 people are Romanian, 106,000 are from Poland, 104,000 from Ireland, etc., all the way down. And you can see this is the 194 different jurisdictions where we have beneficial owners from there. So there are 3,914 beneficial owners in our register who are Kenyan, people from Finland. Obviously, this shows how the countries where they have the most, where we get the data from, we have the most number of people from there. It makes sense. We don't have the register from Turkey or the register from Spain at the moment. So it's just worth saying that's why the Slovakia comes up really high, and Denmark comes up quite high further down. You can also do other queries that are kind of like that. So for example, this is show me the country where entities are registered. So what's the address for those companies? So you can see here that we've got the majority of them are GB, so UK again, then it's Denmark, and then it's Ukraine, and it's Slovakia, which is not surprising, seeing as we pull in data from all those countries. But you can also see that there's a blank, which is rather a substantial blank. Unfortunately, in the data, there's over 50,000 companies that have not disclosed which country they're actually in. So that's why you can see that kind of field there. So this ability to query data not only allows us to see what we can learn from the data, but also see what issues there might be with the data and what might be missing. It's worth saying that as part of our preparations for this workshop, we were doing some of these queries and we were looking into things, and we tried to do one on birthdays, and we actually discovered that because the UK's register doesn't detect if someone puts in a birth date that is in 2022, which obviously can't be right because they are, well, it could be right if they were putting it in the name of a baby, but likely that someone's put the wrong date in the wrong field. We have dozens and dozens of people who we think are like business people who have just put the wrong thing in the wrong place. But we have, a named person who says their birth date was a week ago because they put it in the wrong place. So you can find kind of issues with some of this data by looking at it like this. So just to show you quickly, so when you click through to the register link that Agus has shared, you can click on any of the the links on the left. So for example, I click on entity statement, that takes you through to a kind of hosted table, which you can then query. So you can either go and you can write the kind of more complicated queries like this, or you can go and you can do your own ones. So if you want to say, just show me, let's just sort by the founding date. So we have 8.5 million companies here. So these are the entity statements for companies, and I hope that this is going to work. Some of the things you ask take so long to do that it's a bit challenging to have. Oh, there we go. Right. So you now have this table rearranged so that we just have the latest founded companies. So if you wanted to look at the data and go like, oh, I only want to look at companies that are founded in the last month, because maybe it's my job to just look at new companies, and maybe I want to filter this by another kind of area. So I want to look for ones that are companies have been founded recently and also are in a particular location. Then you can do all of that with this data here. So you can do that by using the buttons and the little cog at the top of each table, or you can click on them like you can in any other kind of spreadsheet. You can also apply different filters up here. So you can go and say, I just want to look for any companies where the name contains, I can see one that says industrial there. So I will say, I just want to look for companies where the name contains the word industrial. So now just Datasette's whirring away. This might be useful if perhaps if there's a company that's got a certain name and they have lots and lots of other companies that have got very similar names but with numbers in them, you could do this kind of thing. And what you should see if this works and it all filters, yeah, brilliant. So we now have a filtered view here. We've gone from 8.5 million companies, and we've now got just 9,756 companies where the name includes industrial, and we've sorted them by the founding date already. So we can see that the newest company in the register that's got the word industrial in it is Fibidon Industrial Limited, that's based here. And so what we can do is, this is what you can do from in one table. And if you want to, we're setting some, so I'm just checking if there's any questions.
Yes, there is one from Andres around whether you have structured data on the type of entity.
Let me come back to that 1 second. As a quick answer, Andres, in the register at the moment, we only have things as registered entity because we're pulling in companies. We are working on that. In BODS, we have the ability to have the entity types of multiple entity types. So whether something's a arrangement, registered entity, unknown entity, etc., etc. Right now in the register, we just have registered companies, a registered entity. We're going to be updating that because you can do it in the data standard. You just we're mapping the data over. And it's worth saying, if there was a trust register that makes all their data public, we could map all of that and then apply lots of the other fields in a certain way. So hopefully what this shows is just, I'm just very conscious of time. It shows the ability to take a massive data set and try and filter it down in a way that you want to do. So for example, if you went to one of the other ones here with an address in, and you wanted to search just for addresses that had a particular postcode or other things, it's possible to do that by going to, for example, the person address, then there's an address field. So you go in here and you say like, where address contains, and maybe you just say filter by this postcode. Then instead of looking at 9 million people, because we have 9 million beneficial owners that are declared in the Open Ownership Register, you can get right down just to the people. Hopefully this is going to wear away and finish in a second. So it just takes a second or two to do these things. So there are 54 rows where that exact postcode is mentioned. If you want to then take that data, you can click on JSON here, or you can click on CSV, and then you will be able to take that data away and put it into a spreadsheet, or to use it in another tool if you want. So the idea here is that you can take that, you can filter the information down, and you can take it away and use it more easily. Any questions? Apologies for having to rattle through some of these things. We will obviously share this presentation and all the links afterwards. I'll check for any of the. It'd be great to have a workshop on how to run design queries. That would be, yeah. Thank you for the session. So I would, yeah, like I said, we have experts on our team who have lots of experience in doing this. And what we want to do is kind of create tools that anyone can use, anyone can apply to any BODS data set from any country or any source to kind of find some information. But yeah, so we've there's a question from Enya. So the question is, looking by sector would be interesting. So that would be interesting. Unfortunately, we don't have, in our data standard, we don't have the ability to record a sector. There's not a particular field. People could add fields and add information if they wanted to try and like find that information. But it's a bit difficult to standardize because there's just so many sectors. We are looking for some of the ways that we can do things like that in the future. So there are various ISO, kind of international standardized codes that people can apply to say, you know, this code means I'm a building company, or this code means I'm in soft drinks or whatever. We don't currently offer that, but it would be something that would be fairly easy to kind of to add in. We do gather lots of information about addresses and foundation dates and things like that. We don't gather sectoral information at the moment. Are there any more questions?
Not that I see. Oh, there's one.
Yes. Can you check all companies registered? As a question from Andres, can you check all companies registered at the same address? Absolutely. So we've done, so my colleague Lewis, who helped put together the notebook, has run queries like that. And we have queries built into our notebook that show you the most common address, or the most common like address clustering in a particular location. So yeah, we have that. And when we looked at it for the UK, I think the top 10 addresses, some of them were company formation agents. So there were, you know, companies that exist to help found other companies or set up other companies, but some of them weren't. Yeah, these are good questions. Number of layers, yes, we've also got that. If you go to the link, the deep note link, I will try, hopefully people can see it here. Let me just go while we're here. So this is the notebook that I mentioned earlier. So this is a lot of questions being asked of Latvia's data. So you can see here what kind of people we've got. So we've got known persons and companies. So these are all the queries you can run against that information. So if we go down, you can see what decade people were born in. This one here, Andres, this, so which section are we in? I think we're in structured, no, sufficient detail. So if you click on sufficient detail on the left, it takes you straight down to a section which shows you the average size and composition of beneficial ownership chains. Now, this one in particular, so it shows, you know, the maximum complexity was 10, 10 nodes per chain. And the mean was quite low, is that 1 or 2? But this is taken on it's just for a smaller number. So it's only looking at like 250, but we're looking to try and see ways we can expand on that. But that's the average, how complex the average beneficial ownership chain in Latvia is. And then obviously, if you know that and you want to, you can say, just show me all the chains that have 10 connections, rather than the ones that have 2, if you want to take a kind of risk-based approach. And you can see down here that we have information on, you know, when things were declared. So a lot of the information is a little bit out of date. This data set was made in 2021 at the start, but you can see a lot of the data was from 2020, but there was still a lot from 2019 and 2018. So maybe, you know, a lot of people need to be reminded that they have to submit their data every year. So this is something that will be we'll be pointing at the UK and Denmark and Slovakia's data as soon as we can. I guess I can have a look at any more questions. Do you want to move on to talk about the homework?
Yes, there was a very small task. If we want to give people like 5 minutes to work on Datasette, it's a very simple question that actually Steve showcased in his example. But if it's too simple to you, you can choose any other question that you might have, either as we were saying on the chat, the layers, the addresses, or if you want to look to a particular birth date or something, just like but if not just this one, that we have the answer and that we have showcased, and then so that you can look for this, and then we have some upcoming questions on what you find. So if you go, let me share the link again. If you go to the BODS dataset that works in the register, you can look for that. You need to see in which statement you can access the zip code, and then look for this one that is stayed there, and just tell us how many companies do you find that share the same zip code. Just 1 minute and a half. Whoever has the answer, please raise a hand or share it on the chat. Any answers so far? No one? I know we're tired. We're just 10 more minutes and we'll leave you free. Has anyone found this? One at a time, please. At least let us know that you could access Datasette correctly.
There's a question in the chat from Enya. Enea. In case you want a hand there, so from the register link, you need to click into one of the tables. So try and find one that's got an address field listed in it, and then see if you can go in there and put the postcode into one of the columns you want to filter by.
Could anyone look for that? We just need a number. How many companies do they share the zip code? Then we won't go into the other questions because we won't have time, so we can explain the homework, but we want the answer to these. So at least let us know that you could access it and that you understood. No.
Oh, there's not quite that many. So there's an answer from Rodrigo saying it's somewhere around 5 million. It's a bit small. I don't know which field that would be filtered by. That would be a lot of people, a lot of companies based in one area of North London. But we can, I guess, should we give the answer?
Okay, we can. Do you want to show it how to do it? Just people get, or I have the query open if.
Yeah, do you want to do it?
Okay.
Shall I stop sharing?
Okay, yeah. So just very quickly, you just go to entity addresses. You select the type of field you want to filter from. So you have these different fields that the entity addresses contain. You filter by address. You say that they want to contain, not equal, because then in the address you have the full, the street name, the number and everything, the city. So you don't want it to be equal, but you want to say that it contains. And then you put the zip code and that's it. You apply it. And then you get this response. And I won't do it now because it takes a bit to load, but you get just the 6 of them, which if you look at the address, you can see the 6 that get the zip code, which actually 5 of them share the exact same address, whereas one is a few houses.
So I guess it looks like Rodrigo tried to write the query himself. Can you press on, you know, where it says view and edit SQL?
Yes.
So it's just worth saying that whenever if you're on Datasette and you apply these kind of filters, if you click on that, it should open up a box at the top.
It's loading.
Yeah. Okay. Right. In a second, explaining. There you go. So this is the query that is being run to show the example we've got here. So it's just worth saying that there's different ways you can format it to get to that. But that's the query that's the query that you get if you do it via the tables. Yeah.
Was that okay? I've seen that Daisy could do it. Okay, so some people watch. Okay, so yeah, you can. I think that you can use the queries for more complex search and for combining others. And actually, the homework talks about that. Do you want to explain it, Steve? Or do you want me to do it?
You can go for it.
Okay. So, I mean, on the one hand, then you'll see in the slide deck that we had a couple of questions beyond just looking for these zip code, and we had 2 follow-up questions that you'll see in the slide deck. So you can, when you receive it, you can try it yourself, look for this zip code, and then respond to the other questions, because the idea was to combine Datasette by filtering these 6 companies and then looking them up in the register and identifying a bit more who are the beneficial owners, because sharing a zip code could say nothing. As Steve was saying, many entities that register companies share the same address, but it could also say something that they're all registered under just one fictional address. But now, if you want to continue testing and trying out the different things that we introduced today, you can continue to work with the register, and we encourage you to look for more than for a company that has more than 10 beneficial owners, and the company that has at least one unknown beneficial owner and try to attempt a response on why it's not named. And you can't use the example we used today. You have to look for a new one. But there are plenty of examples, I think, that you might be able to find on this. And you can share with us the diagrams or the links to the exact URLs of what you're finding, and the responses just over email. And if you want to keep on working with Datasette on a more detailed and data oriented way, we have given you these two tasks on Latvia's register. It's not the whole loan per ownership register, the global one, but just Latvia's data. And then we would ask you to look for who is the oldest beneficial ownership listed in the register and whether that person is still alive. So you are an investigative journalist, you have to find out these, go and find it out. And then who is the youngest BO listed? And there's lots of discussions about whether underage people could be listed as beneficial owners or not, in which cases, etc. So these are also interesting questions to do when you're investigating or trying to assess the integrity of a register. So who is the youngest Latvia register? And to do this, you might probably need to combine different statements, as Steve was showing, by doing an SQL query. So you'll see there a very simple tutorial on how to do it. We introduced it very briefly today, but probably following up the tutorial might be much more easier for you to do. And again, we'll give you a couple of weeks to work on this. And so by around the 10th of November, we would expect this to be returned to us so we can take a look before the last workshop, which is scheduled for the 17th of November. Are there any questions of the homework before we give this workshop to a close, in case you didn't understand something of what's expected to be done? Okay, if not, as Steve is saying in the chat, look for the advice on how to join data across different tables, because you'll need different statements. So we will reconvene on the 17th of November. It is again at 2 p.m. UK time, but please bear in mind that the UK or the British summertime is changing as from this Sunday. So it's still at 2 p.m. GMT, but if some of your countries do not have daylight savings, this might mean that it's an hour earlier for you, or later, earlier, I think. So of course we will share the calendar events and everything, so we stay at 2 p.m. GMT, but just bear in mind that it might be at a different timing as this tool that we have already had. So we will share, as we did last time, the video, the Drive folder with all the resources, the homework, slide decks, and materials, and you have our emails if you have any further questions. I hope this was not a lot of information, or that it was a lot of information, but that you were able to follow us, and you can listen to the recording and pause it how many times you need to follow up. And many thanks to Steve for leading on almost the whole of this presentation and walking through different resources. Hope you have a very fantastic end of your Thursday and weekend.
Yeah, thank you to everyone for joining us.
Okay, see you next time then.